Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here, and it's time to review John Wick Chapter 4. Your favorite Sigma male is back with the fourth installment in the John Wick franchise. Let me tell you a little story called This is the First John Wick Movie I've Ever Seen. I do not typically care that much about action movies. Even when action movies have a lot of acclaim, I'm usually on like yeah, I can see why people like that a lot, but I thought it was like, good or very good, and other people are like freaking out about the movie. There were some early reactions out of this one where they were like, this is actually like amazing. And I was like, this seems like maybe I'm gonna have to get in on the John Wick franchise just to see this one. People say it's really good, so I attended a screening. Fellas, they're not lying. This movie's like actually amazing. I was actually blown away by an action movie for the first time in a long time. And I thought, are all the John Wick movies this good? Am I actually just a John Wick fanboy waiting to blossom? And so I went back and I watched all the other John Wick movies just to see if this was actually like head and shoulders above the rest. I liked the other John Wick movies, but my thoughts on them were pretty much in line with how I thought I would feel. I think they range from good to very good, and it was interesting to see the progression kind of leading up to John Wick 4. Each subsequent movie has been a step up in the production value, the sets, the locations, and the cinematography, which since the second film has been done by Dan Laustin. There were moments in the first three movies that did remind me of the peaks of John Wick 4, but I didn't love those movies overall as much as I love John Wick 4. So having watched all the films, I can now confidently say this does stand head and shoulders above the rest. I've heard some people that think that it's like, somewhere in line with all the other movies, and then there seems to be another opinion that this one is like actually a major step up. So I can't promise that everybody's gonna think it's a major step up, but to me, I was just stunned at the spectacle of this movie. And I wanna start off talking about the cinematography because it kept me so engaged just visually. Every single scene, Dan Laustin is just bringing in a truckload of like the most expensive, crazy, colorful lighting setups absolutely for no reason. There's no reason that any of the scenes need to go this hard on the lighting, but all of them do. Even scenes where people are just like talking in a room in between the action scenes, a lot of those scenes have ridiculous lighting setups. So the whole thing, to me, was just a lights show. There is one scene where there's a giant fan at the top and like it keeps waving this shadow over the frame. And it does so as this scene is like slowly building tension. And the way that the camera captures the action in this film was great. I think even more so than the other John Wick films, this movie is just so confident with what it is capturing in camera. It does not feel the need to cut all the goddamn time. Most shots in this film breathe for like a few seconds before cutting to the next one, at least. The action really plays out in wides and medium wides. This movie has long action sequences, and I think it does a great job building tension and then releasing. There will be a long period of, characters talking and plot and building the tension, and then it reaches a tipping point right before every action scene begins. It does such a good job setting up who's going to be fighting who, which players are operating in this scene, and you're just so on the tip of your toes ready for it to begin. And then it bursts into a crazy action spectacle, and it lasts for like 20-30 minutes over multiple phases. I was very skeptical about the fact that this was 3 hours long, but I honestly didn't really feel the runtime. I never felt lost in the plot or like, oh, it's probably gonna end in 40 minutes and then it ends in an hour and a half, because it really just felt like the normal beats of a regular, 90-minute movie were just stretched out very long. Like the action scene that would normally be 10 minutes is now 30 minutes. What I also like about this movie is how it uses characters who are not John Wick. This movie feels like it's not really just about him. There's also Donnie Yen, who is a great presence in this movie, who in many ways is John Wick's match, and he's blind. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie where it's like, that makes absolutely no sense that he's blind, but like whatever, this is a John Wick movie. And there's also Shamir Anderson. These two characters, like everybody else in the movie pretty much, is after John Wick, but there's conflict there where you actually are kind of rooting for them, not like to kill John Wick, but you're rooting for them in a way. So I thought that added an interesting element to it. And the choreography for each of these characters actually felt personalized, like Donnie Yen's fighting style versus John Wick's. There's also a great variety of weapons used in this movie, from swords, every kind of gun, and even nunchucks. John Wick taking on a bunch of guys who have guns with just nunchucks. I also want to shout out Rina Sawayama. I'm sure a lot of people are curious how good she is in this, and I will say she has star power. She has real screen presence, and she actually is very good. There's a couple like more emotional moments with her character. She's only really in like the first third of the movie, but I would love to see more of her. Bill Skarsgård is playing like a villain with an accent, and he's very annoying. Like you definitely want to punch him in the face, but like in a perfect way, where it's like, yeah, I do want to punch him in the face. Like that's well done that you got me there. Like that's where I want to be with this character. And Scott Adkins plays the most cartoonish villain that there has ever been in one of these movies, and it somehow works really well. Like it is just perfect. This guy is straight out of a comic book. This movie feels so comfortable in its identity and like what it is. And I think this is by far the funniest John Wick movie. Probably a lot of the reason that I cared about these action sequences for as long as they were is because the choreography has like a sense of humor to it, which some of the John Wick movies, you know, have achieved that in moments, especially like the third movie where he's just throwing knives into everybody. I think that was hilarious. But I would say this movie frequently has pretty funny moments, or sometimes it's just such a spectacle and it's just so nuts that you can't help but just kind of just laugh. There's no meta humor, there's no winking at the audience, there's no like funny side character who's like standing by watching and being like, ooh. And while this movie has hours of action, there's a scene towards the end that feels different from anything in any other John Wick movie, in sort of the tension that builds up there and how the audience doesn't really know how this is going to play out. And it was really well done, and there's just a great payoff to it. I'm dropping this review when the embargo hits. If it doesn't have at least like an 80 on Metacritic, I'm going to be gaslit. But if it does get great reviews, you know, some people might think, oh, does this one have like a lot of depth? Is it more emotional than the other ones? Does it dive into his character in a way we haven't seen? No, it doesn't do any of that. And in fact, I did not want it to. I thought the movie knows exactly what it is. Everything in the movie really can be at service of just setting up the next action sequence. It has silly lines. It has moments where it's just being like a John Wick movie and people are like, Mr. Wick. And then Keanu Reeves is just like, yeah. Like the movie's not trying to not be dumb, but I don't think you could call it that because it's just so well crafted. Also, the musical identity of this movie was really strong, I thought, with the needle drops as they were playing. You know, there's a great moment where they do this French version of Paint It Black. They're dropping Justice. They're dropping Gestafelstein. It really is like one of the most insane action spectacles I've ever witnessed. And somehow it didn't manage to become a blur to me. I mean, even with The Raid, I felt like, you know, it's really well done. I can watch an 8-minute clip, no problem, and enjoy it. But, you know, just the hour and a half onslaught, I kind of got a little tired of it. Even Mad Max Fury Road, a movie I think is very good, like, do not get me wrong. But in certain moments, I did feel that was just kind of a blur of action to me. And although the quick cutting is done to an extent where it's actually, like, impressive, I do prefer the way that the shots breathe in this movie. Again, it's weird that I liked this movie that much. I'm surprised. And that being said, if you haven't seen a John Wick movie, you could still watch this one and you'll be fine. Like I was fine. I did a little brief before watching it. You know, I would recommend Get on the Train Now. I can't say enough good things about this movie. I was really blown away. Like honestly, nominate Dan Laustin for an Oscar next year for this movie. I don't actually think it's gonna happen. Dan Laustin's also shooting The Color Purple this year, so the odds that he gets nominated for this over that are like 2%. This is just a top tier action movie. Giving it a 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Who's your favorite Sigma male?